Hey, this is Jon Croft with Culture Warfare with Jon Croft, and I am Jon Croft. And so, how was your week this week? Our week was pretty good. Rebecca is not available this week, but last week we had a great week because we had our interview with Chloe Cole and Emilio Martinez. And so they talked about detransitioner story and about how to get involved in conservative culture. We also talked a little bit about development. But this week I saw Young America's Foundation Reclaiming Woke Hollywood Alive. And it's like a convention for young conservatives. But they talked a little bit about how to reclaim woke Hollywood. But here's the problem. They didn't really talk that much about how. So even though they titled it Reclaiming Woke Hollywood, what they mostly talked about was the nature of woke Hollywood and what it is and why it is the way it is and how would you define it. So they defined the problem for like 70% of the whole talk, which is my issue with it. Really what we should be talking about, and this just goes to my philosophy over here at Media Moses. My philosophy is positivity. It's not negativity. Obviously, there are going to be things that you have to talk about that are negative happening in the culture, but that's not your objective, right? That's the news. That's sometimes what the news is, right? People still need to know what's going on in the industry, but the objective is to build new culture. And that's not the same thing as tearing down the old culture, right? It's not the same thing. Tearing down somebody else is not going to help make your life any better, right? Even though there's some people who erroneously believe that, it's just not true. I'll give you the skivvy on that right now. It's just not true. So you have to transcend that old relationship. You have to move into new relationships. And in doing that, you have to focus on building something new, right? But it's true, though, that the only way you can transcend the old is by studying what went wrong with the old. And then you have to learn to do better. Like, you have to learn to not make the same mistakes that they made, right? So there were good things about Hollywood. What made them so effective? What made their storytelling so good? And those are the things you have to learn. And then there's things that Hollywood did wrong later, right? And those are the things you want to dispense with. Like, you don't want to continue making propaganda that Hollywood makes. Hollywood makes a lot of propaganda now. They have a political agenda. Right now, everybody has a political agenda. It's just like how everyone kind of is a religious person. Even if you're an atheist, I consider you a religious person anyway, because you believe in yourself and your own mind. That's what you believe in. You set that very high on the totem pole, right? So in a way, you worship yourself. And this is perfectly clear in Christianity. They talk about this all the time in Christianity. So Christians know everybody has a religion, that they worship something. And in Hollywood, they also worship something. And it's generally not Jesus Christ. So that means that their moral system is not built in something rock solid. Right? Like, Christ is the rock of the church, the head of the church. He creates the moral value system in the church. And so we follow him. We read scripture. We learn real good, solid morals from the Bible. And so there's hundreds and thousands of years of figuring out what this means in society by this time. So we've learned a little bit better about how to use the Bible in society instead of to twist it for our own purposes and things like this. And I assure you, sure, there are bad Christians out there, but there's also really, really good ones. And if you listen to the right people, you'll learn that this is something you can trust in, that there are Christians who know what they're talking about as it comes to the culture, and also in government, and also in society, and also in the home, and also at church, and at your job. And they actually do know what they're talking about. And they do know what human flourishing looks like, and peace in society. And they know how to bring justice and have peace. And without justice, you can't have peace. They need each other. So Christians know this. But in this case, what we're talking about is conservatives and Christians who are often given bad advice. I believe it's called Young America's Foundation, which I've seen some of their videos before. They're a conservative, kind of like a campus nonprofit who has conventions, and this convention was called Young America's Foundation Convention, I believe, the YAF Con. And it just came out last week. The title of it is Reclaiming Woke Hollywood. They invited the Critical Drinker on. They invited Chris Gore from Film Threat and Alan Ng from Film Threat on to discuss reclaiming woke Hollywood. And they started out with this kind of proposition. So look at this.
Now we're columnist. I started in the theater business. I was a manager of Broadway theaters and Broadway shows. And I always like to have a quick conversation with you guys at these YAF conferences by asking really quickly, how many of you have been in drama or theater or music or creative writing or in any way? I'll look at that.
Look at that. People.
All right. Now, how many of you maintained that interest in college?
See, there are people who really
want to pursue
artists.
this as a career?
Less hands.
How many of you have parents who told you over my dead body?
A few more hands.
And this is a problem.
Right. So he says this is a problem, and he's absolutely correct. This is a problem. But there's an even bigger problem, folks. Let me tell you a little bit about this problem first. I had this same problem when I was a kid, right? And I am like a Gen Xer. So this has been a long time. I'm an artist. None of the schools I went to, there was actually a public school. I went to a middle school, and they had a few great art classes. World building actually was an art class that I went to there. That was middle school, though. When I got to Christian high school, there was virtually no art programs of any kind. And if there was, it was kind of like an extracurricular class, like just a basic art class. But there was almost no interest in art. So I was like literally in both schools. I went to two Christian private schools in high school. Literally in both schools, I was named most artistically talented because I was seems like the only person who was interested in the arts there. I don't know. My parents were not down with me going in the arts. And the claim was you couldn't make a lot of money in the arts. I mean, never mind the fact that I've known numerous artists by now, and all of them made more money than me, right, for doing either cinematography or for doing something like animation or doing something like artwork, like design, graphic design work, or doing something like producing, right? All of them made more money than me. And so I was kind of like on the fringes of the arts for a long time, trying to do the kind of work that I felt like would please my parents. And this was a very bad thing for me to do. If you notice, when he had people raise their hands, a lot of artistically talented people there. A lot of them. Right? A lot of them wanted to do the arts. Right? A lot of raised hands. As soon as it comes to, are you doing this for college? Less less hands. Were you told that your parents said absolutely not? A few hands go up, right? And so what is this phenomenon? What is this phenomenon in the culture? It's not just this era. It's been the last 40 years, at least, where we have this belief, and this is even a Christian convention. This is a conservative convention, right? So Christians and conservatives both treat the culture with disdain, with neglect. And I have a lot more to say about this because, I mean, even this week, and this happens to me all the time, where people would be like, well, I'm not a this person, I'm not a that person, when I'll share content with people, right? And then they'll go watch a movie or something and have fun. You told me you're not a film person, or you're not interested in entertainment, because I'm sharing you entertainment, like conservative or Christian entertainment. Oh, I'm not into that. And then they go watch a movie and have some fun. Like, actually, it looks like you are into it. You're just not into what I'm selling, which is a reform of Hollywood with Christian or conservative values, right? And I think a lot of people believe that there's nothing that Christians or conservatives can offer the culture, which is why they don't encourage Christians or conservatives to work in the culture, right? So where does this belief come from? Well, it comes from Marxism. So a lot of people are taught, right, that we live in a stratified society and a class society, and only the elite, the people that are on the top of a Marxist society, are allowed to work in that field. In USSR, right, Soviet socialist republics, you were only a few people were allowed to do the arts. You had to be high quality artist and be sold out to the party. And if you were, you could do it. And this is effectively what happens in Hollywood, where they gatekeep and make sure that you have that ideology when you go to Hollywood. And if you don't have that ideology, you're not encouraged to continue in culture. Now, I believe that as it comes to Christianity and as it comes to conservatism, they're not necessarily gatekeeping. They're not necessarily Marxists. But what they do is believe the lies that the media and that the academics tell them. And the lie is that you can't make money doing this, and that it's not useful or utilitarian or pragmatic, because conservatives are very useful and pragmatic, and Christians are very pragmatic as well, in the sense that they believe that their job, especially as men, is to provide for their family. And so never mind the fact that now women are in the workforce and their job is just to enjoy, right? And so obviously if they're a feminist, they're not taught to suppress their artistic desires as much. And so often Christian feminists will end up in Hollywood, but because they're feminist, right, they're allowed to stay there. They are actually very parallel with Marxist values then. So you can see that this just contributes to the issues in Hollywood. It doesn't really, it doesn't make room for a Christian conservative value system to enter the culture. So, and then there's another problem here too, right? We were watching that clip, right, from Young America's Foundation. Well, these guys get to have a great conversation. Well, let's play a little bit of it here.
And do they have is their political or cultural agenda superseding what actually paid for all of those big buildings that they work in?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there was an event that occurred in 2016 that kind of fundamentally shifted the way Hollywood viewed the public. And then there was a global event that happened in 2020.
Hamilton won the Tony Award.
I don't know what
So
happened,
what they're talking about is the state of Hollywood and why it is the way it is. And they talk about this, the state of Hollywood, and what's going on there, including defining the problem and debating a little bit. One person says, no, this is more the problem. Another person says, no, this is more the problem. I don't have a problem with these guys doing that, right? That's what these guys actually do for a living anyway. They do that. And so they're just bringing their shtick here. The problem is Young America's Foundation should be working to help these young adults to make use of their lives in the future. And complaining about Hollywood and defining the problem with Hollywood is not enough to go out and start affecting the culture. You have to get to another stage, right? So like you start talking about
To go. Are they resistant? Does Hollywood actually loathe this country so much that the last thing they want is to promote pro-American ideas overseas?
Yes, they're getting into the theory of why Hollywood is the way it is. This is 27 minutes in. They're still talking about why Hollywood is the way it is. 32 minutes in.
Emotion, whether it's sadness, happiness, or being scared. Watch those and ask yourself, why does that movie touch me the way it does? What is it in the story, the way it's shot? Figure that out and then replicate that.
I'm just going to...
See, now we're finally getting into how to do what Hollywood does. Finally, 33 minutes in-ish. Let's see, what brought us here?
It's starting to build its own kind of film community. Most of the time, it's just indie filmmakers who just want to get together. They'll share camera equipment. They'll share lighting.
This is it. This is when they finally get to, and this is about a 43-minute video. So there's a few questions asked in the end, which also have some helpful nuggets there. But it takes them 30 minutes, and they only talk about it for like 5 minutes, which is literally what you can do as a conservative to start getting involved in culture. And what did they say? It's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I just wish they would talk about it more. What they say, and what here Alan Ng is talking about is if you're a local, you can start making local indie films in your community with other people who want to do that. And everybody shares equipment and they work together and they are part of a community that just makes small local indie films. And that's a good place to start. They also mentioned the fact that you can work as an intern in Hollywood and try to work under good people, right? Let's see. I think there might have been something else they say here.
Your own stuff.
Well, and the fact is, forget about
Okay,
one
yeah, this is Chris Gordon. He starts to get to it. I think he likes to get down to brass tacks and make some strong statements, and he really does make some good, strong statements.
He calls
here.
his own shots. I say I'm of the path. I've always been entrepreneurial. Make an indie movie.
Well,
that puts yourself in the driver's seat. That means that you can go. Now, when I say make, doesn't mean you direct. Maybe you produce. Maybe you write. There are many different. Filmmaking is a team sport.
Yeah.
So
That's generally how you start out with making a film, is you have to either write it or direct it or produce it. And each one of these people, they have a unique craft, but they can overlap with each other. And a producer can acquire a script, just like a director can acquire a script, just like a writer can write a script, right? But a writer can't necessarily produce or direct. And a producer can't necessarily direct. And a director can't necessarily produce or write, right? But oftentimes a director does write and sometimes produce. And often a producer can also direct because they just have so much experience on set. They've learned how to direct from being on set, or they actually are talented. They're not just money people. And sometimes producers are great writers. That does happen. But often what you'll find is that a writer starts out just writing or directing, and then they learn, possibly after their first script gets optioned or sold, and they're on set. They're allowed to come on set. They come on set and they learn a ton, and that's how they learn to produce or direct. Probably produce first. Directing is a craft, is an art form. That's a lot harder to just learn by observing than producing. Producing is more of of just nuts and bolts stuff you learn by experience. And if you learn that by experience, it's like you just have to know all these things. So, and then you have to be the responsible party to do all of them. And there's just a lot of stuff to do when you're producing. So a producer has to do a lot of junk. That's even why you can't often produce with just one producer. You've got like 20 producers with these big Hollywood films. Literally 20, 30 people are producers. And then they have this whole staff of production assistants and production coordinators and all this other stuff, assistants to the producer and all this stuff. It's crazy, the amount of nonsense you can get into with one of these big pictures. That's why they're $215 million. It's nuts. So generally what you're doing is, as Chris Gore suggests, is you're getting baptized by fire when you make an indie film. And you're often not prepared for the first time you make one. Maybe even the second, third, and fourth time you're not prepared. Because often it can be very different. You're working with different people, with different styles. There's different demands. And it's trial by fire. So the good thing about that is if you're made for that, you will learn a lot. But if you're not made for that, it will be hard for you. It'll be very hard. The hours are difficult. The grind is difficult. The amount of not knowing and having to do things even when you don't know what's going to happen is enormous. There's enormous stakes quite often. And people are coming to work with their nerves on end. And they have to deal with all kinds of drama. So what you want to do is find a good group of people who are calm, calm as Lake Placid, and they are just good people to work with, and they care about their craft, and they're not interested in drama. And you find those people, and you hold on to them, and work with them if you can. There's a few other techniques. I mean, one cool thing that I saw here was with Chris Gore, where he answered a question by a lady in the end, because they do a Q&A in the end. Let's see. I think this is her.
Tracy Lehman. Find her on Instagram.
He's literally telling this girl to contact a director who he knows, because she wants to learn to be a cinematographer. And I think that's a great thing to get into. Cinematography is one of the best crafts in filmmaking. It's a fun craft. I'm not as technical. Even though I have equipment, I'm just not as technical of a person, so I shouldn't say I couldn't, but it's like, because I have an eye, but I'm not as interested in all the technical stuff that cinematographers have to know. But it's a really great skill to learn, and it's a really great job to have on set, because you do have to know so much technical stuff. And if you have a capacity to do that, you're making it so much easier for everybody else on set. By being the one who knows framing, knows composition, knows all these things, right? Knows your camera work and your equipment, and all the glass you need to know about for this particular shoot. And you love it. If you love what you do, it makes so much easier to do filmmaking. If you love it, So when someone knows what they want to do and they just pursue it, it makes it so much better for you, I think. And he literally gave her a name if somebody dropped a name. So that was really cool on this. But here's my issue, is that we need more, not just people being aware of what's going on in Hollywood, but people learning how to be involved in actually making culture and how to do culture building. Instead of just kind of allowing people to push you out of the culture and saying, can't do it, not interested, not a film person, not a this, you can't, and continuing to tell you no, right? That's just boring, first of all. They're just a boring person. And second of all, they're not supportive, right? They're not actually trying to be your friend and help you. So find people who really will help. But we also try to give advice here on Media Moses and on Cultural Warfare about how to contribute to the culture and how to return our culture to something more sane and more loving and more humane and more civilized than what we've had in the last 15, 20, 30 years, right? And Hollywood is a decadent kind of cesspool right now. And so I'm not saying we need to move to Hollywood, but we do need to build a community. And that community needs to be strong. It needs to stay together and be supportive. It needs to know what it's doing. It needs to make films that are better than Hollywood. Not just almost to Hollywood's level, right? Like Sound of Freedom, right? It was barely Hollywood level. But it was Hollywood level enough to make an enormous amount of money. And so the thing about Sound of Freedom was that it hit all those buttons for a conservative who wants art that reflects conservative values, right? Protecting children instead of harming them. Fighting for what's right instead of being cowardly. Caring about our country instead of kind of denigrating it all the time. Caring about family instead of always being part of hookup and breakup culture, right? And breaking up families, which the left is known for and they're famous for. Instead, why not try to have like a film about getting married and having a family that's like a good family? And of course Hollywood's going to turn their nose up at this stuff for the next decade. I mean, look, when the Hays Code came around, Hollywood and the media in Hollywood kept denigrating them over and over. But by the time it got to Gone with the Wind, Hollywood was making more money, and they were talking about the word damn. Like, should that be? And oh my goodness. Well, you might think that's shocking for people at that time, but 10 years earlier, they were making softcore porn. So the Hays Code changed like the consciousness in Hollywood. And so that's the kind of impact conservatism can have if we are willing to go there, right? Because you have to know where you're getting your morals from your values from. And the guy in charge of that was a Presbyterian minister, and he knew where he was getting his values from. So if we have something like that again, I don't know if what Donald Trump is trying to do is going to make that much a difference. It might, who knows? I haven't seen it yet. He needs to learn from the history of the Hays Code and what could possibly be done today to reform Hollywood. It would be useful. I know they have passed I think it was a nationwide incentive for like federal incentive program of some kind. But I don't think they've done much more than that. Really, it's not up to Donald Trump to change all of Hollywood. That's absurd. It's up to us to get involved in making the culture and building the culture up. This is why I talked to Chloe Cole last week. This is why I talked to Emilio Martinez last week. It's not just because I'm a filmmaker, right? It's because they're doing something to help change the culture. And making a film that helps detransitioners is part of that, you know? You guys have no idea, like, the kind of projects that if I could get funding for, you guys have no idea, like, the kind of stuff we're working on. If only we could do it, and we can't reveal it to you, right? Because this stuff is incredibly controversial kind of stuff. And often it's not ready to be revealed, right? And so, like, similarly to Emilio Martinez last week, he was saying, well, we don't have a script yet, and we're working on it, and we're going through development, right? So development is a process. It's sometimes a very private process, you know, even though I do want to share some of this process with the public and with fellow conservative, you know, culture builders. I do feel like many people need to know how difficult culture building can be and how to do it. And I'm not saying this Young America's Foundation video gives bad advice, but I do think, like, that it happens for every Christian and conservative, that you're going to hear people who really don't even know what they're talking about give you advice on how to make a movie or how to build culture or how to do all these things or whether you should work in the culture as a career. And generally it's bad advice, right? You have to kind of trust your instincts. And if you're a Christian, right, you have to pray and follow God. But also, and this is really important, this is something I didn't do for a long time, was listen to people who are in the field you want to be in. Like, find those people. Ask them, how can I do this thing? Right? And you know, you might not always get helped, but there will be someone who will help you, you know, and can offer you really good advice about how to do that thing. So especially if they're a fellow Christian or conservative, I think that you'll have a much higher chance of getting better advice from those people because you also have the same value system. So what I saw here with Reclaiming Woke Hollywood, I've seen in other places as well, which to me kind of is endemic of a lot of the way conservatives relate to culture. They're nominally interested, right? And Daily Wire is an example of this right now, where they are kind of nominally interested in the culture, like they could be involved in the culture more, but they're just kind of like not as involved as they could be. And so, you know, Hollywood is a place, and therefore Hollywood is a community that grew from that place. Communities can grow a lot of things. Like if you have a farming community, you can grow a lot of food. But if you don't have a farming community, how are you going to do that? Right? Like, you need locations when you're shooting things. You need places to live. You need places to do business. You need places with competing prices and competing quality and competing and different styles and different opinions about art, how art gets created. You don't need one guy on top just deciding everything and how these things work. No, that's not going to be very dynamic. It's not going to be very creative. It's not going to be as productive. Like, what you want is a whole community, because a whole community is often filled with a variety of people who have competing ideas. And those competing ideas is actually good for you. And it forces you to produce kind of like in a way that's different. It forces you to produce in a competitive way, which is quicker, faster, stronger, more. right? Because you're trying to beat somebody else at their game. And if at the end of the day you can come together and shake hands and be like, wow, you did a good job there, that's how competition's supposed to work. Because even though while you were making that product to compete with this guy, you were like, oh, I hate this guy, I'm going to do a better. You actually don't hate them. You have a form of respect for them. Because sometimes you're actually learning from them, being like, oh, they're good at this thing, and I want to be better at this thing. But I can't. Why can't I do that? And so you have this kind of like mimetic rivalry, right? And this is something that Rene Girard talks about, but it can lead to good things, but also bad things. And one good way that mimetic rivalry is used is in a capitalist society. A capitalist society harnesses mimetic rivalry for the good of everyone. But generally, a mimetic society is used in a negative way. It's used to condemn neighbor and to scapegoat other people. But what you could be doing instead is building a community that has love for neighbor as the center of it, which is a Christian community. And so you need a Christian community that also cares about culture building and the arts, like making another Hollywood. And if you can do that, which all by itself is a seriously difficult achievement, but if you can do that, then what you can do is have loving competition in an incubator style environment, right? A competing community, a community with internal competition. And it forces you to get better and better and better at your product, As long as there's not a lot of dirty play happening in that competition and cheating, you will do well, right? There's no like Hollywood accounting, right? Which is one of the mistakes Hollywood made, right? Because it bloats all their budgets. It hides actually their profits, and then they can just claim they made a very profitable. That's not good for the industry, right? What's better for the industry is literally be honest with your failures and honest with your successes. Because if you are, you're providing a map for others to do better. So it literally helps the health of the industry if you expose yourself in your budgeting to the public, right? And then you can say later they can say, oh, you shouldn't have done this and you shouldn't have done that. And you can say, like, you're probably right. I probably shouldn't have done that, right? And obviously it keeps everybody from breaking the law as well. Like, you spent that on what? Like, well, you shouldn't have done that. Like, shouldn't have is fine in retrospect, right? But breaking the law is another matter, right? So this prevents, it's like providing for the immune system, the health of the community, to get better and better as we do this. So Reclaiming Woke Hollywood, that video, should be focusing more and more on the how to build like Hollywood thing. And instead they kind of left you with some great notes at the end and some great like, do this, make a film. But it's kind of like, hey, make a film, right? Like, that's the advice. And that's good advice. You should make a film. But the problem is it's leaving out all the steps of how to make the film, right? It's leaving out all the steps of like, wow, this is really discouraging. I didn't realize making a film was so hard. Yeah, it's extremely hard. And so now you're going to need a lot of advice on how to do that, or how to get through that, or what about the producing, or what about the financing, which most indie filmmakers, it's all about the money. It's like, well, how am I going to get the money to make this film? Right? So that is a whole other question. And as a producer myself, I still struggle with that question all the time. So, I'm not made of money just because I'm a producer. That's just a myth that producers have all the money, though they acquire the money somewhere else by providing a good pitch and providing a good script and providing good assets and providing a package, as they call it. And then investors are going to hopefully invest when you do all that, So we need more of this kind of building. And this kind of building can only be done through belief, we've talked about Daily Wire, we've talked about Lore TV, we've talked about Angel Studios, we've talked about Wildwood Studios, we've talked about 5 and 2 Studios, which I don't think is conservative. I think they're just Christian. We've talked about, there's a few other places, like Michael Pact as a small documentary incubator. These kinds of things, small projects, Kappa Studios is doing stuff. Generally few and far between, though, compared to Angel's probably the first, then the potential of Daily Wire, although it appears to have dropped off the map. And then you have Lore TV, which also has a lot of potential, but it haven't created a lot of content yet. And then you have 5 and 2, which I believe they just started getting the green light for Joseph of Egypt. I'm kind of tying the Wonder Project in with them because they work together quite often. So they're kind of like a dual team at Amazon Studios, or Amazon the distributor, Prime Video they call it. So they've got a lot of potential as well, but I haven't been as interested in their projects after The Chosen. I just haven't been that interested. And Daily Wire has so much potential, but they appear to have squandered it in some way, and I just don't know. All of these guys have so much potential, but they're not putting it where it really matters, in my view, which is building that community and making that community happen. Like something like Wildwood Studios could do it. The problem with Wildwood Studios and Zachary Levi, his project, is that he's not setting out to solve the real problem. And the real problem in Hollywood is not, we're not living together in this tight-knit community. They already have a tight-knit community in LA. The problem is solving the issue in that community. The issue in that community in Hollywood is a problem of low morals, right? And nepotistic, unhealthy competitive practices, and not maintaining the artistic integrity, right? Which includes veering into propaganda, things like this. And so you have to attack these issues, first of all, ideologically, and say, no, they're bad ideas. And then you have to give your answer to all of them. Like, what's my answer? And so when you do that, now you're providing hope. You're lifting a standard. You're raising a standard like an army. You're saying, we're ready to fight because we've got our standard, which is what we stand for. Right? This is what we stand for. And we're going to fight for it. Right? So that's something that everybody can look up to. If you're battling in an army, you can look up at the standard. In the case of America, right? You can look up at Old Glory and be like, I'm fighting under this banner because I know what America stands for, what it means to fight for this country. And the same thing is true in this case. You have to fight for good morals and decency and healthy competitive practices and good storytelling, right? So all those are tied together. Obviously, the morality makes all these three possible. But, without those things, forget about it. Like, oh, good, you made a new film. Oh, good, you're making a film for a different company. Like, oh, that's nice. You have a new streaming platform. Oh, that's interesting. Don't expect it to be any better than Hollywood or any different, because you haven't approached it ideologically, or rather, in this case, morally, and pointed out the issues with Hollywood and then attacked those issues ideologically, and with your system of values, and said, we're not going to do that. And then you follow through and you don't do it. You follow your system of morality, which is hopefully God's, and it's a better system of morality. Well, you know, why should we listen to you and your system of morality? How is that any better? Right? So it has to be an objective standard. And if it's an objective standard, you can all believe in it. And you can all fight on the battlefield for it. You see what I'm saying? So without that, good luck with your new platform. Good luck investing millions of dollars in this platform that's just like Hollywood, or it's no better, or there's no new standard to fight for. You're literally fighting under the same standard as Hollywood. This doesn't make it any better. So, and often conservatives don't get this. Often conservatives, because not every conservative has Christian values necessarily. And so what they don't realize is they just check your politics at the door. Which, by the way, it's not fun to have your politics checked at the door when you're in filmmaking. Did you not figure out that Hollywood shouldn't be doing that? Now you're going to do it? So that's not the new standard, right? Oh, are you a Republican? No, that's not the new standard. The new standard is morals and decency. That's the problem with Hollywood storytelling. It's not that they're liberals. It's that their morality and decency went down the toilet. And they don't do good storytelling as a result. And they do propaganda as a result. The propaganda comes after. You know, like politics is downstream of culture. The same basic concept. So, the culture and what's upstream of culture? Your religion. Your system of morality creates your culture, and your culture affects the government. It affects your politics. So everyone's focusing on the end result, the politics, and they're not focusing on the source, the culture, and the religious values above that. What's going to affect the culture except your morals and your values? And so you have to have an answer for those morals and values. Where do you get those from, if not from something like the Bible? We have hundreds of years of talking about this stuff. That's under our belt. So we can talk about it, right? A lot of people can't. Why? Because they just haven't studied those things. That's all. You know, like me, I study people like Francis Schaeffer. I study people like John Knox. I study people like, you know, there's lots of people in history you can study and think about why they did what they did, you know? And I don't just study Protestant dudes, even though I'm Protestant. No, I study the church fathers sometimes. And obviously the most important church fathers are the apostles and Christ himself. So study the Bible. And if you can do that and then get some church history under your belt, you'll see that a lot of these things have already been talked about. If you're wondering about a question for why to make art the way it is, you know, why I repudiate people who don't like images of Christ, for example, why I repudiate those people. If you're asking questions like, well, why is government this way, and why should we be telling stories about this when it's not even a Christian story? Why should I be telling a Greek mythology story, right? Well, there's a reason for that, right? And the Greeks, they understood government better than a lot of people today, you know? So there, you know, like a lot of this stuff has been thought about already. And if you're not studying the history of it, like obviously with myths, you know, and I'm not just talking about Greek mythology, whatever. With myths, this carries the values of our culture and our civilization. So like many of these things, sure, some of them aren't the best stories. You know, there's bad and negative things in some myths, but there's a whole slew of good stuff. There's a whole bunch of good stuff. You got to learn how to unpack that as a storyteller, right? And then repackage it in a new package that's similar to how your culture is now, speaks to your culture now. That's cool stuff if you can do that. So that's the objective. You should be studying stuff. If you're a Christian, or a conservative culture builder, you should be studying stuff like Paradise Lost. You should be studying stuff like Pilgrim's Progress. You should be reading this stuff, not just seeing films. Obviously, you should see films as well, mostly tearing them apart for how bad they are, but see older films. You know, there's plenty of still great older films to watch that are far more powerful, resonant, and morally deep and meaningful than today's films. So study those films. And the beauty in that is some of those films could be remade today and be more beautiful as a result. If you keep the strong moral values already embedded in them, if you keep those things instead of trying to whitewash them like Hollywood does and get rid of those things, if you keep those things, now you're instantly creating conservative art. Probably didn't know that, but you are. So that's what we do. And what we should be teaching people is how to do that. And to believe in each other. And to try to make this kind of community happen. It's an important goal to have. So I would do that. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. You can find my writing at MediaMoses.com. You can find me on YouTube and X at The Media Moses and at Jon Croft. On YouTube at Culture Warfare with Jon Croft. Enjoy the rest from the battle this week, but don't forget to give a salute to the culture builders who make life worth living. Have a great week, guys.